So the first concept he brings up is dialogue and how present it authentically, and it can't just be mindless chatter. So if we think about it like that, then what he's saying is when we speak, we have to have some kind of meaning behind it. It can't just
be empty words. Like, idle chatter, according to Freire, lacks the ability to transform the world through denunciation of it and taking action against it.
Okay. So what we're saying is that when you speak, there has to be some kind of authenticity about it. But how do you know that it's authentic? Is it when you have some kind of agenda along with what you're speaking about? Like, for instance, you can't just talk about education reform and how we need it, but you need to be like, in order to get education reform, we need this. Like,
that could be it. Like, critically thinking about dialogue, he actually mentions critical thinking as a core aspect of dialogue later on in the chapter. So I think you're right about that.
Okay. And then he says that in order to get liberation or whatever, you need to have action and reflection. And that should be part of your dialogue, right?
Yeah, but like, action can't be sacrificed for reflection and vice versa. Because if you sacrifice reflection, then the word dialogue just becomes like talk of action for the sake of action.
So that's kind of like rashness. It's like protesting, but you don't really have a solid idea of what your cause is. You're just protesting and throwing yourself out there. Okay. And then if you do it the opposite way and you just think about it and you never act on your, reflections, it's equally as
damaging.
bad. Yeah, damaging. It's kind of pointless.
Pointless.
It's idle chatter, like he said. Okay, so what else does he? He mentions that you need love for the foundation of dialogue and dialogue itself.
Yeah, he says that love is the absence of domination, which is you're forcing your opinion on others. And what I view that as is like another way of the banking method. Like, just oppressing people with your opinion, but not having like interrelations. And like, love is a form of respect.
Right.
So respect, and with dialogue comes that respect. So
makes sense. So you can't, when you're in the teaching situation, you have to have the respect and love for your students, and they have to have it back, so that there can be healthy communication.
And like a form of open-mindedness and understanding because of that respect.
And so that neither dominates the other, and all of the ideas get equally shared and distributed and thought about, instead of some person just telling the other person and then they're submissive, and that turns into oppression.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that makes sense. I like that. I really liked how he said,
hopelessness cannot dialogue.
Right.
And it actually flees from dialogue.
Okay, so founding itself upon love, humility, and faith, dialogue becomes a horizontal relationship of which mutual trust between the dialoguers is the logical consequence. So pretty much what we said about you need to be able to communicate freely and be open-minded.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good.
I really liked where he said something along the lines of that hope is not waiting, but fighting and like moving towards a goal. Like, I really like that because it speaks to me.
Yes, I liked when he said, hopelessness is a form of silence, of denying the world and fleeing from it. Yeah, what you were kind of paraphrasing that in your notes. Um, because when someone's hopeless, they feel like there's no use in fighting.
Yeah,
So they
like there's nothing to fight for.
Right, so they quit there.
But when they have hope, they're like, I can do this. There was a possibility of this coming true for me, so.
They continue struggling for that liberation.
Yes.
Even though, things might be stacking up against them, they still keep going. And that's, according to Freire, that's the most important thing, that they keep trying. That's true, because if you stop trying and you pretty much accept your position as the oppressed, you're just, it's not doing anything to help,
Yeah.
And once other people see that you're not trying, like when you're in a group,
it's like a domino effect.
Right.
Like it affects their like morale. That's it.
Yeah. Once the team sees that one person's out, then they start doubting themselves, and they start doubting the possibilities, and so they just kind of all slowly flow back into that whatever realization they had. It just kind of, it's a waste. It's a waste of time and complete. They go back to being dehumanized objects. Makes sense. And it's very sad that some people would do that.
So what about what he says about dialogue and critical thinking being like a solidarity between people and the world? Like critically thinking about how the world affects a group of people, or how a group of people can affect the rest of the world.
Right.
Like critically thinking about something and putting those thoughts forth in dialogue. I think he's saying that it's a form of action, and in taking action, you have to realize that there are risks involved in you putting out your opinions of the impact of people on the world, or vice versa.
And also, once you put these ideas out and they start brainstorming, and new ideas and plans start forming, that's when transformation actually happens. And change takes place. So yeah, he's saying in order for change to happen, you have to have this dialogue, but it has to be an open-minded, respected, where there's room for change and criticism and critical thinking without anyone being put down or oppressed or
with fear of that.
Right, because domination is fear and love is not fear. So it makes sense. And that kind of makes sense too. Makes me think of like abused women, how their fear is mingled with starts becoming a kind of perverted love in their eyes, and so that's why they never get out of their oppression, because they don't realize that love is not fear. It's not meant to be together. You shouldn't be afraid of someone you love. So that, to me, that's kind of like a real life example. It makes perfect sense. And so once you apply this to the banking concept and to education, you realize why so many public schools are having problems with children not retaining the lessons and
because there's no dialogue.
Exactly.
It's just like pouring information into them, expecting them to spit it back out exactly the same, and there's no transforming or like change or like concrete opinions about the world or themselves in the world.
And the standardized tests only exacerbate that, because exacerbate whatever. It only makes it worse. The oppression for the children, because when you take those tests, they all have to be exactly the same. It's standardized. And so if you find an answer that to you is, still logical, and it flows correctly, if it's not the answer they want, you're not going to get the points. So even though children might be trying to think outside the box, or perhaps they just see things differently, they're getting punished for it, and so they're having to assimilate, and that's leads to another form of repression. So it makes sense why that would happen. And I think not only are the children, the students being oppressed, but as well the teachers.
Yeah.
Because they can't teach what they want to teach.
Or they're not. The teachers themselves aren't thinking critically about what they're teaching because there's no needs to the way they're teaching it.
Teachers get away with just reading from a book and then handing out worksheets because that's what's expected of the students. So the students aren't learning anything and the teachers aren't learning anything, and so it's just pointless being in that classroom. It makes sense. I think it would help the public school system so much if they could have. I mean, I know they already have workshops, but I feel like maybe these workshops should encourage more critical thinking and more creativity, and not just for GT students or students who are in pre-AP classes, but the students who are in the average classes who honestly just sit there day after day, tax after tax test, bubbling answers. They're just like pre-tests, to make sure that they can pass their tax, just so the high school can get rid of them, and they're just passing them by and they're not actually getting anything from the whole education process. So they wonder why there are so many uneducated masses out there, and it's because nothing is being done about it. Someone needs to teach these teachers how to teach convincingly enough so that even a student who's might be having problems at home, or maybe was not shown such an academic interest, they need to be able to reach out to those students and on their level find something in common with them so that there can be this dialogue. And that's what I really detest about the public school system, is that so many teachers think that you have to have them doing worksheets, or you have to have them doing some kind of like printed off, copied, even just having dialogue like Ver's talking about. If you could just talk to them and have them actually come up with their own ideas, and then maybe write about it in a journal. If you need grades, great, have them write about it. Write a paragraph about what you thought about this.
Yeah, just encourage that original thinking.
Exactly. Instead of just making them like a mechanic in their head, just like processing and spitting out things.
Memorization.
Exactly.
Vocabulary, which I never saw the point of.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between learning the words so that when you read them you understand, the concept, and there's where you're just like you're memorizing the words for 5 minutes so that you can take the test and then forget about them.
Yeah.
It's totally useless. If they would give them reading assignments, that's something that they're interested about.
Yeah.
And throw in some of those words, and then they'll be like, well, I want to know, but I don't know what that word meant. So, okay, well, we'll look it up, and then that way they're encouraged.
Comprehension.
Exactly. It's comprehension, but at the same time, something that they're interested about.
Yeah.
So, I feel like if they would take into account their audience, you have to realize that these students were not raised by parents who read to them every night, or they might not have a library at home, like a whole bookshelf of books to read, and anything at home actually to read, and maybe the most media and information they get is from like their Facebook pages or their TV shows. And so you have to think about that, that you have to be able to find something in common. And I think a lot of teachers, they feel like they're superior because, I read books and I'm educated and blah blah. But you're not superior. Everyone can learn. There's still much
there's
more to
a
learn.
possibility for absorbing information and like comprehending it, and actually like giving something back because of that.